invited you to offer the acknowledgement of our meeting place.
You don't?
Well, I mean, I will for the acknowledgement, but I'll put it down for the song.
Good evening and welcome. Welcome back to those who have been with us all day and just have come back from dinner. Welcome back to those who were here last night, and welcome to those who are here for the first time. This is the Lester Randall Preaching Fellowship. There's two parts to this evening, and the first part is a presentation, keynote address by the Reverend Susan Sparks, and that will be coming up in a moment. But and then after that, there will be a liturgy involving our Iona Passage group and some singing and storytelling. And it's going to be a wonderful evening, and we're delighted that you're with us. One of our keynote speakers this week is the Reverend Dr. Terry LeBlanc. And Terry is a Mi'kmaq from Prince Edward Island, and he is a man of true grace. And we have been so blessed by your presence and so grateful that you've been able to share this time with us. And I've asked him to offer words of acknowledgement about the land on which we meet this night.
Thank you, Peter. So the land immediately around Toronto and down through the lake is a land that has been in constant occupation for well over 15,000 years. The Huron-Wendat, the Petun, most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River have made this place their home. And so we find ourselves on lands that their ancestors have occupied and on lands in which their ancestors have been buried. It's also a land that, along with other regions of the Great Lakes, has been the focus of the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt, and a treaty between the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and the Iroquois Confederacy. And so there have been many people trafficking or moving as traffic in the land and finding place in this land to come together, to meet, to exchange their common humanity and to share ideas. And so we're here tonight for just that kind of a purpose. It was also a place where people would exchange the gifts that they had and share with one another in some very particular cultural ways. And so I thought tonight I would sing one of the oldest songs of the Mi'kmaq people, which is something we call the gathering song or the Mawiomi. And it's just simply an invitation in our language for us to come together. Come together now, my brothers and my sisters. Come together and bring the gifts that you have. Come and bring the gifts that you have and share them with one another. Bring your gifts now, for without your gifts, our gathering is incomplete. And I think that's true tonight as we gather. Without all of us being here, this gathering would be incomplete. So the song goes like this. And you'll have to forgive me, I have no drum to keep a nice rhythm with, but it does go like this.
We've invited Peter Wallace to introduce Susan to us tonight, but first I want to be sure you know who Peter is. Peter has come to us from Atlanta, Georgia. He is the executive director of Day One, number one, but you can do it either way, I think, .org. It's a wonderful resource that a lot of clergy here use, and each week he interviews a different preacher, and there are sermons by that preacher, and it plays on radio stations across North America and in many other countries, and also is podcasted on your website. And there's also all kinds of archive material there, and some wonderful articles. It's just a wonderful resource.
Thank you, Peter. I've been with the program for 17 years, but it is 73 years old. It started as the Protestant Hour back in 1945. We worked with four primary mainline denominations. We now have expanded that, and we may even let some Canadians in soon. We really do.
You're coming up here.
Yeah, well, we might. Yeah, we'll just start a new beachhead here. We're on 220 stations in the U.S. and in a few other countries, with one station in Nova Scotia. So the answer for you, if you're in Canada, is to come to our website or to subscribe to the Day One podcast on iTunes or any of the podcast platforms. We're on there. So thank you. We would love to hear from some of you. There's some really good preachers up here. So thank you.
Thank you. And Peter has a display in the gym along with a number of other displays by partner seminaries, and there's a bookstore there. And on your table this morning there were a number of CDs of some of the people you've interviewed. Are there still some left?
I meant to check. I did not. If you didn't get a CD, just let me take a brochure and email us, and I'll be sure to get you one, or you can just listen to the website. There is on the bookstore table, we have a new resource from Day One. If you're looking for a good church adult formation class or small group resource, we have Faith and Science in the 21st Century, which is an 8-part series. The book is downstairs, and then you can download audio and video excerpts to use in the classes. Wow, among the participants in that series are Scott Jose, who's here, Catherine Jeffords Shorey, the former presiding bishop, Tom Long, Luke Powery, and some others. So it's a wonderful resource if you're looking for a cheap but good
you mean
Sunday school.
Inexpensive.
There you go. In America, we say cheap.
Well, thank you for being here. It means the world to us to have you come up all the way from Atlanta.
Yes.
And please introduce our guest.
Who? Susan Sparks. Here she is. No.
You go.
Susan has become a dear, dear friend of mine, but I do have a confession, and she doesn't know this, and I just feel like revealing it, that I really don't like spending any time with her personally, because I develop a medical condition called dyspnea. Have you heard of that? It's when you can't catch your breath because I'm laughing so hard. I hope we don't have any casualties tonight. Susan Sparks, by now you know that she is a Baptist preacher, former attorney, stand-up comedian, Harley driver, blah, 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 just like any other Baptist preacher. And you can read her full biography in the program book. I'm not going to bore you with that. But she does write a nationally syndicated, I guess that's American nationally syndicated column. And she has a new book coming out next year. Oh, by the way, her first book is downstairs as well. It's right next to mine, I think. And it is Laugh Your Way to Grace, which is just a phenomenal book. You owe it to yourselves to pick that up. But she's got a new book coming out next year, and it's kind of based on her workshop, which I think you got through 2 of your 10 points this morning. So you really need to be sure to buy that next year. So without further ado, allow me to introduce my dear friend and yours now soon, Susan Sparks.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Wow, what a great crowd. I wish my congregation was this big. Welcome to my friends at the Lester Randall Preaching Festival. Welcome to my new friends I know we have a number of congregation members here tonight from the church and also from the surrounding community who have come to visit tonight. We're so glad that you're here. Terry, I have to give a shout out for that beautiful welcome song. Thank you. I just think the idea of welcoming in people with their gifts ought to be the call to worship in every single church service. So thank you for that. I just was very touched by that. As you know, our theme for the Preaching Festival is peace. So tonight I wanted to come at it with a little bit of a different lens. Kind of like a billboard that my husband Toby and I saw driving through Minneapolis a couple of years ago. We're driving along, and on the interstate there's this big billboard, and at the top it says Minnesota Cremation Society. Okay, which is just odd. You know, we should just pause and realize how odd that is, right? But underneath that there's a photograph of a casket, and underneath that it says, think outside the box. Right? A for advertising, right? But that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to think outside the box a little bit. I mean, humor to me is one of the most powerful tools that we have. It breaks us open. It helps us see things in a fresh new way. It brings us to, I've lost my first guest already with the, I'm so sorry. It breaks us open. It helps us see things in a fresh new way. And it helps us see the commonalities first and not the differences. And I think that's one of the things I really want to focus on tonight. It's amazing to me that even in the differences, we find the commonalities in humor. That's why part of my stand-up routine is about being a Southerner in New York City. I'm from North Carolina. I mean, I feel like we're family. I can just tell you this. That move from the South up north, I am still scarred by it. You know, you guys know. I mean, New York City, people are just, fast and sharp, and even the greeting is different. Like in New York, people are kind of short and curt, to greet them, they're like, yo. That's all you get, that's it. In the South, the greeting is a big formal production. You have to have 5 very distinct parts to be considered polite, right? Or anybody visited the South here? Okay, y'all know what I mean, right? I'll just go ahead and tell you though. Part number 1, you take a tiny little word and you make it a great big word. Hey! Okay? Then you just throw in some random meaningless noises. Oh my gosh! Okay? 3, no matter what the person looks like, you tell them they look great. Now, in case they don't believe you, part 4, compliment a piece of their clothing. Oh, I love your blouse. But here's the most important part, number 5, ask about a family member. Okay, so you reel it all together and you get, hey, oh my God, you look great. Look at your cute shoes. How's your mama? It's just different. And I'm so miss it. I mean, food shopping is different in New York. Although we're all Americans, we still have this difference. Like in New York, people go to these fancy sounding grocery stores with names like Zabar's. And you hear people say things like, can I serve white truffle chev with quail? Honey, you don't hear that where I grew up, okay? Because the last time I was down in North Carolina shopping at the Piggly Wiggly store, which is a chain that exists, right? Yes, you know, okay, Piggly Wiggly. The woman beside me said, "Do you think I could serve Velveeta with fat back?" I was like, "Well, yes, you can." Maybe this is something I should have researched. Do you have Velveeta in Canada? Okay, everybody know. Roland, do you have Velveeta in Cambridge? No, okay, all right. Well, I'll send you some as a gift. Just get your address. I mean, it's just, I don't even know what it is. It's sort of like Cheese Whiz and Silly Putty all put together. But you gotta admit it's a versatile dish, you know? I mean, when I was little, my mom would put it on Ritz crackers as sort of a fancy party appetizer. We would melt it with Rotel tomatoes. Did you ever do that? The nacho dip thing? We would caulk the tub with it. It's great stuff. But here's the biggest difference that I found moving from the South up north, and that's religion. Yeah, I know. A woman in the front goes, "Woo!" I myself was raised Southern Baptist. Don't all run for the door at once. But you know, you can always find something nice to say about everybody, and here's something nice that you can say about my Southern Baptist brethren. You can always count on their theology to be short and sweet, like their idea of heaven. You ain't Southern Baptist, you ain't coming. Sorry. You know, that's a lot of people not coming. Because when you look at like world population statistics, that's like, I don't know, 7.4 billion people not coming. You look at a world map, that's like every land mass on the face of the globe not coming, except Texas and Alabama. Which, honestly, I think should make us all rethink our answer to the question, do I want to go to heaven? I don't know. I'm not sure. You know, I see some folks looking at me like, wow, you're an ordained minister. You should not be dissing people like this. And you're right. I am an ordained minister, but I'm a Southerner. And down south, we have this little tool that you can use to say anything you want about anybody that you want, as long as you end the phrase with "bless their hearts." Yep. So Peter said I was a lawyer for a while and moved up to New York. And again, that whole change, once again, being all the same country, but totally different. I was a lawyer up there for another 5 years, 10 total, and there came a day when it was clear to me that I needed to make a change. I needed to jump ship from being a lawyer. And true story, I was sitting in my office in Long Island City, New York, and the phone rings, and somehow one of our card holders, a MasterCard holder for Citibank, comes through to my line. I was working for the bank at the time. She proceeds to tell me that Jesus had just appeared in her living room and told her that her Visa bill had been forgiven. Bless her heart. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. You know, I was like, did he talk to you about the late fees? Because Anyway, I hung up the phone, and it was that moment that I thought, if this guy Jesus can mediate between first century Palestine and 21st century Citibank, I need to go work for him. And that's where it started getting complicated, because maybe you have felt a call like this in your life. Maybe it was your call to being a minister, or another call in a profession where it made zero sense. You know, here I was, a lawyer and a stand-up, and I felt this call into the ministry of the church. So I did what most normal, sane people do when they hit kind of a crossroads in life and can't make a decision. I quit my job, I put everything I owned in storage, I jumped on British Air, and I went to India to work for Mother Teresa. I know. And I want to share this one little story, because for me, this is where everything changed in my understanding of humor and joy and hope. I worked for her orphanage called Shesha Bhavan. And I remember the first day walking in, like here's the doorway, and I just froze at the door, because the images were so powerful, frightening, really. There were 2 and 3 kids in the crib. Some were actually tied to the crib, not out of abuse, don't get me wrong. They just had so many children they were trying to care for, and they didn't have enough people to step into that role. And so I just took a deep breath and I crossed the door, and 2 or 3 steps in, I felt a tug at my leg, and I looked down, and there was this little girl, like 5 or 6 years old. And one of the nuns comes over and says, "This is Anna." And so I didn't know what else to do. I just plopped down on the floor, and she crawled in my lap. And the nun told me, she said, "Anna's been blind and deaf since birth, but she loves to laugh." And when I heard that, it just struck me as so, I don't know, I was just so surprised. I laughed, and I was like, really? And the second I did, Anna put her ear right here and felt that vibration and then just squealed with laughter, which made me laugh. She put her ear right back here. And we went back and forth like that for what seemed like most of the afternoon. And I have to tell you, it was in that moment, it's like God just dropped a neon sign down. Yes, joy and the spiritual life go together. Yes, joy in church. Yes, joy in religion. Yes, joy in life. Because here's this little girl who basically, in Western standards, had nothing. Really. She had no home, no family, very little life expectancy, and yet from this place where she'd never experienced the world, she just exuded joy. So it was clear to me that I had to get back on the plane and come back, bringing humor into the church, kicking and screaming. And may I tell you, brothers and sisters, it has been kicking and screaming. I entered seminary, and I'm going to tell you, this is painful. It was painful for me. Trying to be a comedian in seminary? I mean, those professors were not ready to teach theology to a comedian. Again, bless their hearts, please, Seriously. But, you do what you do, put my head down, got through, and here I am. And to this day, people ask, "What do you do for a living?" And I'm like, well, I'm an ordained minister, and I'm a stand-up comedian. And people across the board, they're like, "That's so great. Why?" And it's so interesting to me that people don't see the connection. Now, part of it is that I've had an opportunity to actually research this. I wrote a thesis on it in seminary, and there's just so much that I know I'm able to see that others haven't seen. But for example, do you know the history of humor in religion goes back to the 15th century BCE? There's actually an Akkadian myth called the myth of Adapa, where there's a story about a guy named Adapa, a man named Adapa, and he was trying to get eternal life, and the dialogue between Adapa and the gods was full of laughter. And some of it was scornful laughter, but some of it was hopeful laughter. But that's the first evidence there is, but 15th century. I mean, the Mesopotamians, the Greeks, the Babylonians all had humor within their religious practices. And the one I love the most, I found a scholar who had identified an Egyptian creation myth where God laughed creation into being. I love that. And it was, are you ready? 7 bursts of laughter. Hello? Sound familiar? The first burst of laughter was light. The second burst of laughter was water. And on until the 7th burst of laughter when the human soul was born. I just love that image that the air power from oxygen gave life to the human soul. I mean, most of you know the Hebrew word ruach, which is breath and spirit. So when we laugh, when we inhale and exhale laughter, we're inhaling and exhaling spirit. And my favorite author, Anne Lamott, says that laughter is carbonated holiness. I like that, right? The connection is it's very clear to me. I think it's clear because I also keep a lot in my office to remind me of the connection between humor and religion, and my congregation buys me things to remind me. I brought a few to share with you. I have a bumper sticker collection that I am pretty proud of. Some of them I couldn't bring because they're a little inappropriate for church. But here's a few. Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite. Oh, this is good. This is a Mark Twain quote. Go to heaven for the climate, hell for the company. Yep. God loves you with an asterisk. The asterisk says some restrictions apply. One of my personal favorites, in these days and these times, God wants spiritual fruits, not religious nuts. This is for my sisters here. Eve was framed. Yes, yeah, applause in the back. And last but not least, and most inappropriate, but I love it, love thy neighbor, but do not get caught. Oh, I know, come on. Come on. All right, if we're gonna do edgy, I'm gonna do one more edgy thing. T-shirts, my congregation loves to give me T-shirts. This one I actually bought myself, so I can't blame anybody for this one, but Toby and I were out in Utah, and this is a great example of a religion making fun of itself, kind of. We were in Salt Lake City, and we went into a little brewery that had all types of beers that were named after different aspects of Mormonism, right? Knew nobody would believe me when I actually ordered a porter beer that was called Polygamy Porter, right? I knew no one would believe me, so I bought the T-shirt, and here it is. But the real kind of kicker on it is the beer says, Polygamy Porter, why have just one? It's bad, so bad. It's very, very bad. That's the worst it gets. It goes uphill from here, okay? This one they gave to me last Christmas, I love so much. It's a manger scene, and it says, "It's a girl." Last but not least, I certainly must share with you my favorite Bible verse, because, you know, Baptist pastor in the house. I shared this with my workshop this morning, and they liked it. Who are my workshop people? Yes, all right, right on. This is a story, 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 9. Make sure it is the King James. That is the translation you need for this particular story. This is when the Israelites and the Philistines were at war. The Israelites basically go to God and say, okay, we need to go to war with these folks, but are you okay with that? Obviously, I'm paraphrasing, okay? So God says, that's fine, just don't lose the Ark of the Covenant. Well, they go to war, they lose the battle, they lose the Ark. Roland, you're looking at me like, I don't remember that story. Hold on. They lose the Ark, and we pick up in 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 9, God has a comment. And it was so that after the Philistines carried the ark about, the hand of the Lord was against the city with a great destruction. And the Lord smote, don't you love that word? Lord smote the men of the city, both small and great, and they had hemorrhoids in their secret parts. Brothers and sisters, you cannot make this up, okay? 3 years of seminary and $75,000. This is the best thing I learned the whole time. Right there. We are children of a God with a sense of humor. There it is. You know, if you don't take anything else away from tonight, and enough, let me just say this in order to erase some of the scary, terrible things I just shared with you. Take this away. If you can laugh at yourself, you can forgive yourself. And if you can forgive yourself, you can forgive others. And there it is in a nutshell. It's all about finding that inner peace first so that we can take it out and find peace with others. But my dad put it another way, Herb. Don't you love that name, Herb? Herb said, in life you only need 2 tools to get through. WD-40, and say it with me, duct tape. Yep, right. Why? Because everything in life breaks down into one of 2 problems. It moves and it shouldn't, or it doesn't move and it should. Right? And it's true in life, and it's also true, it's with humor. Humor is the WD-40 and duct tape of life. Like WD-40, it breaks us open. It helps us see things in a fresh, new way. And like duct tape, it bonds us together as a community. And it helps us see the commonalities first. Let's talk about duct tape just for a second. You know, sometimes we can tend to lose perspective. Especially, you know, I know my pastors in here know what I'm talking about. You get all wrapped up and the sermon coming up and the color of the flowers and is there a coffee stain on the carpet and la, 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 and your to-do list gets so huge that you forget where you fit in the big scheme of things. All of a sudden, your to-do list is bigger than anybody else's. Your problems are bigger than anybody else's, and it just explodes and expands and expands. Sometimes we need to be able to laugh to remember where we fit in the scheme of things. It's like an old story that I heard. Maybe some of you have heard this one before. There's a battleship out at sea, and all of a sudden an object appears on the radar, and the engineer radios ahead and says, we're on a collision course. Please change your direction 10 degrees to the east. The object radios ahead and says, change your direction 10 degrees to the east. Same exchange again. Finally, the captain comes on and says, we're a United States battleship, 12,000 tons, headed directly for you. Change your direction 10 degrees to the east. Little voice comes back on. Please change your direction 10 degrees to the east. I am a lighthouse. We got to remember where we fit in the big scheme of things. And that's where laughter comes in. Because if we can laugh at ourselves, we get a little bit of perspective. It's like we sort of step back and see things a bit differently. You know, Charlie Chaplin said that life in the close-up is a tragedy, but life in the long shot, that's a comedy. And when we can laugh, we get that perspective. And we remember just for a fleeting moment that we're just human. We're just doing the best we can, and maybe we need to cut ourselves a little break. Maybe we need to offer ourselves a little peace. I had a woman at a workshop recently share a story with me about Ruth Graham, the wife of the evangelist Billy Graham. And apparently at the library he has down south, Ruth is actually buried in a memorial garden back there, and her tombstone has the craziest thing on it. Apparently the story is this: they were out preaching, and they were coming home, and they ran into some road work, and at the end of it there was a sign, and apparently Ruth said to Billy, I want that on my tombstone. Well, sure enough, she passes away, and here's her tombstone, and you could look it up, you can Google it. Here's the tombstone, and it says Ruth Graham, birth date, death date, and underneath it says construction finished, thank you for your patience. I just love that. I was like, I'm gonna copy that. Because we're just human beings under construction. We're just doing the best we can. And when we can laugh at ourselves, we cut ourselves a little bit of a break. You know, I think it comes down to being able to let go. You guys know the serenity prayer, right? That wonderful prayer by Randall. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You know this, right? Well, there's a new one called the senility prayer that I'd like to share with you. God, grant me the senility to forget the people I didn't like anyway, the good fortune to run into those that I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference. Sometimes we just got to let go, right? Humor helps us laugh a little bit at ourselves, so we bring some internal peace. But there's another part of this that's critical, and that's the peace with each other. And that's where the duct tape comes in. I mean, so many levels that humor helps us connect with others. I mean, just on a basic level, just annoying people, annoying people in life. We just have got to figure out a way to see the commonalities and get past our differences. This is shocking news for everyone here, but there are annoying people in the church. Oh, I know. I have when I first started, I had a sextant that worked for us, the guy that takes care of the building and the grounds. My sextant was allergic to dust. He also was scared of heights and allergic to paint fumes. I think that's a bless your heart in there too, Yeah, you just got to be able to laugh at stuff like this. 2 years ago, we're preaching in the middle of Advent. We have a wreath, the Advent wreath. We'd used real greenery, which we will never do again because this had gotten kind of brown and crunchy, and in the middle of the sermon, it explodes into flames. So I'm going to keep this nameless, but one of our very astute deacons jumps out of the front row and grabs the communion cloth, and throws it on the wreath. And everybody's just looking at the wreath as the smoke dies down. And you can kind of feel the whole congregation sigh of relief just a little bit. And yet, there's another member on the front row, one of our very outspoken, older senior members, who takes a deep breath and says, well, there went our best communion cloth. It's like, wow, not thanks for saving me from a fiery death, right? But this cloth that I am pretty sure I bought at Target, I'm pretty sure I did, has a tiny little smoke stain on it. Wow, you got to be able to laugh, right? I mean, it's that level, and then it's maybe you take it up a notch, and it's conflict. I mean, it's personal conflict. I mean, I remember working one morning, I went in really early at Citibank, and I walk in, and the phone is ringing. Don't you hate that when the phone's ringing, and you haven't even had your coffee, and you hadn't even unlocked the door? So I picked up the phone, mistake number one, and it is a lawyer screaming at me about a lawsuit that he was threatening to file against the bank. And I was like, ugh. So I start filing through my inbox, and I put him on speaker. He's screaming and yelling, how could, we're going to sue you, and it's going to be $40 million, and da-da-da-da. All of a sudden, I find the suit that he had sent me in draft. And I look at the heading at the top, and please understand, it's January, okay? I'm in Long Island City, this burned-out warehouse district, an area of Long Island. It's January with an ice storm, and it's about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, all right? The top of the lawsuit says, in the state court of Hawaii, Honolulu Division. And I'm like, I took him off speaker, and I'm like, you know what? I wish you would sue us. Could you do it now? Let me give you my personal home address. I would like you to FedEx it to me, and if we could get it on a fast track for trial maybe Monday, that would be awesome. Dead silence on the phone. He's like, are you out of your mind? And I'm like, no. I wish I had a camera I could show you. I said, I'm looking at an ice storm in Long Island City, and you're threatening to sue me in Honolulu. Burst out laughing. So we just laughed for the longest time, and then we got to talking about the weather. And then we got to talking about something else, and the next thing you know, commonalities, connections, case settled. It's just bringing those commonalities together. It's also, I've watched humor be able to cut kind of power to its knees in conflict. And sometimes that's really important when that power is evil. I was actually in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago for a conference, and I met a young man who just wrote a children's book called White Flour, Flour, and you're not going to believe it, but it's about a Klan march that happened in Tennessee, which is an unusual thing to write for a children's book, but hear me out. Apparently, there's a Klan march that happened in Tennessee in 2007, and this had happened repeatedly, and the citizens of this town got sick of it. And so they band together, and the next time the march was scheduled, they put together a clown troupe called the Ku Klux Clowns, and they showed up as the Klan starts marching, and they start mimicking them. So when the Klan is yelling white power, they start yelling white flour and throwing bacon flour all over the Klan. Some of the clowns came dressed as brides and started yelling, wife power, wife power. And all they did was mimic them all the way down the street to the point where there came a point where every bit of dignity and power had been gutted, and they dispersed and left, never to return. The other example I heard that was wonderful, it was from a tiny town in Germany. The neo-Nazis were marching, and the town got sick of this. This happened about 5 years ago. So the town voted to donate €2 for every meter that they marched. And so the next time they came in, the townspeople came out and threw a party. And they marched with them, and they threw banners, and at the end, people celebrated and cheered, because the Nazis had just earned 120,000 euros against their own cause. The cause was for helping people leave extremist groups. Humor cuts power to the knees sometimes. And then there's times where humor also, I think, and maybe one of the most important things it can do is help us prevent from judging each other. Lord knows we can judge each other by the dumbest things. Things that have nothing to do with who we are as human beings. I mean, things like the color of our skin, or the God that we worship, or the person that we love, or the language that we speak. I mean, I found out about this personally the hard way. Toby and I were on our big Harley out west a couple of years ago. We'd been riding all day, and we decided to stop at a little motel or little exit on the border of Montana and North Dakota. There are two motels on that exit. We pull up. One was the Days Inn, the other was the Sea and Sand, which in Montana is suspect. But I decided to give it a chance. So I walk in, and granted, okay, I'm looking a little dicey, but whatever. And I walk in, and the young woman behind the counter takes one look at me and says, "We're full." I'm like, "Really? There are no cars in the parking lot. I just want one room." And she goes, "We don't rent to your type." Well, okay, let me just tell you, we've been riding all day. I have on, biker leathers, my fake tattoos, what most ministers wear on vacation. It's not a big deal, right? And she goes, we don't rent to your type. And I'm like, well, what type might that be? She was like, Hell's Angels, biker people. Well, okay, I had to laugh. I'm like, oh, no, you got this all wrong. My husband out there in the biker leathers, he's a retired federal prosecutor, and I'm a Baptist minister on vacation. It's all good. Yeah. She leans across the desk and says, "Bible says it's wrong to lie." Usually I have a comeback for anything, not this time. So I'm like, okay, I'm backing out of here. So we go to the biker-friendly Days Inn, right? We check in, I clean up, I put on a clean Harley t-shirt, and I go back, and I told Toby I'll be right back. And he saw me pick up my business card. He goes, "Oh, please don't please." And, got my little card, Reverend Susan Sparks, senior pastor, Madison Avenue Baptist Church. I'm like, la, 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 la. And I walk into her, and I'm like, I put the card on the counter. I'm like, Bible also says, judge not. Was that very Christian? No, but it was so fun. And here's the kicker. As I'm walking out the door, she starts laughing and goes, "Well, I guess there's a little Hell's Angel in all of us." Which is so true. It's in that moment that the commonalities just sort of kicked in. She realized she was judging me. I realized I was being a little snotty to her. And we laughed about it. And it changed the relationship. I read the most wonderful report, and a couple of years ago, you may have seen the same thing, that scientists have realized through genetic research that we are 99.99% genetically the same. Isn't that amazing? 99.99% genetically the same, which means, notwithstanding gender, ethnicity, race, whatever. So if that's true, then that means all of the conflict and all the arguments and all the war, it's over 0.01%. We can't let go of that tiny little decimal. We can't let go of it. That little tiny minuscule difference. Jack Kornfield, the author, tells a story of two POWs talking to each other, and one asked the other, "Have you forgiven your captors yet?" Second one thinks and says, "No, never." And the first one said, "Well, it appears that they still have you in prison, don't they?" We just are prisoners of the inability to forgive that little tiny percentage. But when we do, we see, when we can laugh, all of a sudden we realize there's a bridge. We have something in common. There is something that brings us together, and it helps with even peace building. The Georgetown University Conflict Resolution Program lists humor as a key tool in peace building. And I think that's why I'm so proud of this comedy show that I've been a part of. Peter didn't tell you because I think he was afraid you might leave. I've been a part of for the last 15 years, called Laugh in Peace. And it's me, a stand-up rabbi, and a Muslim comic. And Rabbi Bob started this right after 9/11. And we have been on the road ever since. And it is not about talking about religion. It's not preachy. This is us talking about what we have in common, us telling our stories, our universal stories of life. Bob loves to get up there and talk about learning ancient Hebrew in seminary, and then he takes his first trip to Jerusalem, and he wants to try it out. And he gets in a cab, and he says what he thinks to the cab driver is, "Please let me off here." And the cab driver just bursts out laughing. And Bob goes, what? He goes, do you have any idea what you just said to me? Bob's like, no. The cab driver said, you said, behold, here I descend. Funny, but a universal issue we can all imagine. We can all understand translation issues, you know? We work with several incredibly talented Muslim comics. Mo Amer is one of them. You should check it out. Mo has a brand new special on Netflix. Mo Amer, A-M-E-R. It's amazing. But Mo talks about, being a Muslim American, going through airports. He was like, come on, y'all, seriously? He didn't say y'all, but okay. He's like, come on, you get upset that you have to be there 2 hours ahead of time? I have to be there 2 months ahead of time. Azhar Uzman, another comedian we work with, is an Indian-born Muslim from Skokie, Illinois. So just right there, that just is a wonderful story. But he tells the story of right after 9/11, and you have to understand, Azhar is a long black beard. He is a part-time imam, so wears very traditional clothing. He's at a stoplight outside in Skokie, and a pickup truck rolls up. Window rolls down, and the passenger leans out, young guy, and he goes, "What's up, Osama?" And then, Azhar's like, if that's not bad enough, then the driver leans around him and goes, "What's going on, Gandhi?" Azhar's like, okay, let me just take a moment here. I am being simultaneously called Osama bin Laden and Gandhi. What does that even mean? I'm going to kill you by not eating. It's ridiculous, so ridiculous. Bob ends our show sometimes with a story that I love so much. And keep in mind, this is a rabbi telling this, okay? Just again, to share the commonalities that we have. He's once in a while, he'll anchor the show down with this, and he'll say, I'll leave you with this story. There were two rabbis talking. One says to the other, I don't know how to tell you this, but my son converted to Christianity. I don't know what to do. And the other rabbi said, really? My son too? What do we do? And they thought for a minute. They said, let's go talk to God. So the two rabbis go to God, and they say, we don't know what to do. Both of our sons have converted to Christianity. And God says, really? My son too? We have way more in common than we do different, right? Way more in common. There's one last piece that I want to touch on before I wrap up. And that is the idea of humor in crisis. We can work all we want on personal peace and then understanding our peace within community, but when the hard times hit, all kind of falls by the wayside. And I have found humor to be the most powerful tool we have getting through hard times. I myself, I'm a breast cancer survivor. 12 years last month, actually. And okay, well, you know what? The clapping here, I know, given the statistics, there are others going through it right here. And if you're not going through it, you have walked with someone through it, or you have our caregiver with someone. And it doesn't have to be cancer. It could be anything. It could be the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, the loss of a bank account, the loss of one's youth. Oh, don't talk to me. But we all hit hard times. And I found the ability to laugh in a place of pain was the thing that got me through on so many levels. It's a physical healer, for example. And when you laugh, and I bet you've read some of these articles, the actual intake of air does everything from lower blood pressure, increase endorphins, increase heart and lung function. Right before I went into surgery, I was the anesthesiologist came in and saw I was really nervous. And he must have been a comedian, because he comes in, he taps me on the shoulder, and he points at the IV bottle, and he goes, don't worry, really, this stuff is a great vintage. I think he saw through me, maybe, and which made me laugh, and I went under while I was laughing. And, it's pleasant, but here's the thing. I read later that there's studies that show that extra intake of oxygen can help on recovery on the other side. So he did me just on number of levels of favor. It's also a psychological healer. It's an empowerment piece. Just going through the tests before surgery, I had to go through a couple of CAT scans, and the last one The guy comes out, the technician, and he goes, one more, seriously, that's it. It's a liver scan, and we'll be done. I don't know if you're like this, probably not. I'm sure I'm the only person that does this, but I was surly and kind of rude. I was feeling sorry for myself and in this place of why me, blah, blah, blah. So when he said, last test, it's a liver scan, I was like, great, just know I had a beer last night. Well, he just looked at me like, wow, I have to deal with people like yourself. Okay, fine. So he goes back, he does the test, and he comes out, and he's ashen white, just pale, pale, pale. And he says, we don't usually give results on the spot, but you have the early signs of Bud Light syndrome. And I didn't catch what he said, and I was like, oh, what is that? And then it dawned on me what he said, and we both just had this great laugh. And I have to tell you, I left that hospital just straighter and stronger. There's something about, you can look pain in the face, and if you can find a way to laugh in that place of pain, it's like you say to it, you may defeat me, but you're not going to define me. It's a rebellious place. It's a place of strength. And it also helps us through grief. If you've ever been through a place of grief, sometimes we can get stuck in places of mourning. The first funeral I ever did was in Staten Island. It was for a woman in our congregation named Mary, who was 96, and one of these folks that would never leave the house without perfect hair and makeup. So I walk in, open casket, funeral home's packed. I'm so nervous. And her daughter Mary, who's 78, says, can you say a prayer of her mother? And I'm like, of course. I was thinking to myself, it's my job. Yes, I can do that. So I walk over, I put my arm around Mary, and I reach in the casket, and I put my hand on I put around Nancy, her daughter. I put my hand in the casket and touch Mary's arm. And the second I touched it, I was like, oh, which is not a pastoral thing to do at a funeral. It's just not. And her daughter turns to me and is like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm really sorry, but your mother's arm, I'm trying to say this so the rest of the funeral does. I said, your mother's arm is square. She looks horrified and then bursts out laughing. And she goes, I should have told you, sorry. Reaches in the sleeve, pulls out a box of hair color, and says, Mama was scared we wouldn't have that color on the other side. So we're going to bury her with Miss Clairol 4A1CB. Everybody just started crying, laughing. The funeral director was horrified in the back. But we were just crying, laughing. It's just the funniest thing. And it was such a release, too, So there we were, tears streaming down our face, laughing and laughing. Then all of a sudden, those tears of laughter morphed into tears of grief for losing this beautiful spirit. And then somebody else would tell a crazy story about Mary, and we'd start laughing again. It would be tears of joy, and then it would be tears of mourning. And it just was this seamless weaving of grief. I'll tell you, we'll circle back to Herb as I wrap up. The person I learned the most about humor from was Herb, my dad. We lost Herb about 6 years ago. I mean, he died, sorry. Gotta be careful about that. Sorry. And I remember being with him one of the last days. He was in the hospital. He was in a lot of pain and in and out of consciousness. And I was sitting with him. And all of a sudden, the door opens and a nurse walks in. She's like 7 years old, maybe. She's got like a whole Britney Spears thing going on. And I hear her say, Mr. Sparks? And I look over, and a miracle. His eyes open. He starts sitting up in bed. He starts focusing on Britney. He's fixing his pajamas. The next thing you know, he had like 2 hairs left, one here and one here. He's fixing those. I'm like, hello, family, been here all day. So Brittany comes over, kind of sachets over, and she goes, I won't take long, Mr. Sparks, but I'm here to check your catheter. Oh, so I'm the daughter, so I'm out, right? So I'm walking for the door. And as I'm walking out, I hear my dad take this big, big, deep breath and in a thick Southern accent say, well, honey, you just make yourself to home. so embarrassing. And the worst part was that story got told over and over and over. Over and over at the funeral, over and over at the memorial, over and over at Christmas, and then on his birthday, and then next year. And it's just, it took years of me hearing that story to finally not totally cringe and to realize the power in what he did. Because we're all going to find ourselves in a place of pain. I mean, Herb was in his place of pain. We might find it in, traffic in Toronto, or waiting for your driver's license, or in a chemo chair. It could be anything. But we're going to find ourselves in a place of pain, and in that place, we have two choices. It's that simple. We can stay in a place of negativity and anger and resentment and take everyone around us down with us, or we can find one little thing to be grateful for, one little thing to smile about. One little thing to be hopeful about, one little thing to embarrass your daughter about in front of the nursing staff. And what happens when you take that choice, then your heart lifts a bit. And all of a sudden you bring the room with you. It's about legacy. It's about how we choose to live our life. It's just that simple. Mom and Dad used to say, leave things better than you found it. I mean, at the time, I guess that was my room, but it's great wisdom. We should leave things better than we find them. Leave our families better than we found them. Leave our communities of faith, our communities, our nation, our globe, Mother Earth, better than we found it. And it's all about just finding that place of peace in all aspects of life, good and bad. There's always a way to find hope. I'll leave you with this one last story that I think gives a pretty powerful image of that. I was in New York on 9/11, and the day after 9/11, our church was about, 2 miles north of Ground Zero, and so we had the doors wide open for people to come in and pray. We had people still kind of coming from rescue from downtown. A couple of the churches a few blocks south were actually mobile morgues. I mean, it was raw. And so we stayed there all day, and then I was headed back to the subway because I was in seminary at the time. And there's a fire station on 31st Street, about 2 blocks from us. And as I walked around the corner, I saw there was a fire truck that they had brought back from the site. And it looked like a meteor had dropped on it. Just filthy dirt, crushed. But when I got closer, what I saw was so unbelievably amazing. Around this symbol of just utter destruction and hopelessness, people had gathered. And it was from all walks of life, people from all walks of life. Every race, every nationality, every gender. It's just, there was, here's a Hasidic Jewish man drawing the Star of David in the dust on the truck. There's somebody drawing a cross over here. There's a little boy that was drawing like a heart. Somebody else had a little girl had like a smiley. Somebody was writing the word hope. There was this incredible microcosm of the world gathered around this image of despair and hopelessness, offering images of hope. And to me, that's it. That's the ball game right there. I realized that's it. In the worst places that you can find yourself, there is always a glimmer of hope. We were given it at birth, that little hope, that little joy. The world has tried to beat it out of us, but it's still there. And so tonight, what I hope that we will all consider doing is finding that little point of joy and hope. Grab it, pull it out, dust it off so that it'll lift us up and everyone else around us. Because I'll tell you something, if you do, then together, I guarantee it, we can create not only personal peace, but world peace. We can make peace happen, and we can do it together, one joke at a time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We will begin our service as a song and story in about 5 minutes. musicians will start.